Bowl season, folks. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Steve Merrill dropping by from Wager Talk. You can catch him right here on Wager Talk TV. It's right here on YouTube. And also, of course, the deep dive on wagertalk.com. Steve supplying our under the radar selection that he hits on 21-5 over the past two seasons. We're going to dive into the bowl schedule. Steve, a lot of teams that people don't get a chance to see on a regular basis. I love bowl season. It's fun, and it's got a lot of quirky names and a lot of interesting matchups. So we'll start it off with the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Georgia Southern taking on a Bobcats team from Ohio University that went 6-2 in the MAC, 9-3 overall.
Well, this is a very fitting game to start with. It's actually at the bottom of the rotation schedule, but as you mentioned, it'll be the early kickoff at 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, so don't miss it. It's the first game of the official bowl season, and kind of sums up all the things that make handicapping the bowl games tricky this time of year more than ever. I've been doing this for 28 years now as a professional handicapper. Bowls have always been a great money-making opportunity, but it's always been kind of the case. You got to figure out who wants to play, motivation, especially these early bowl games. But now the last couple of years with the new, NIL deals, the transfer portal, not having to sit out when you transfer, it's just opened up the floodgates of people missing bowl games. So it's something we have to look into. And Ohio does look like they're going to be pretty thin, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Quarterback out, running back, receiver. So on the surface, it does appear to set up well for Georgia Southern. And it's been priced into the line. Ohio was briefly a 1.5-point favorite. If you look at raw power ratings for the season, they would be at least a field goal favorite. Now Georgia Southern is over a field goal favorite, but I'm not sure it's enough of adjustment because Ohio's going to really be depleted. And yes, Georgia Southern has motivation here. In fact, a good long-term angle, believe it or not, is to play on cold teams coming into the bowl season. Georgia Southern was 6-2 a month ago, already qualified for the bowls, and they went 0-4 straight up in ATS to finish the season. They have not covered or won a game since October 26th. That's actually a positive sign. And one of the reasons is because people normally don't want to bet those teams, and it keeps the line a little more honest where it should be. Of course, that's not necessarily the case here with Ohio sitting everybody. This line has moved. But I still think Georgia Southern will be focused. They're happy to be in any bowl game, and it looks like they're going to have more of their lineup when they play on Saturday.
Steve Merrill from Wager Talk breaking down the bowl games. They get started on Saturday. 7 bowl games. Let's get to the next showdown. Jacksonville State, new to the FBS, so they're playing in their first bowl game, taking on Louisiana. Interesting in that Louisiana, a common selection for the New Orleans Bowl. They're close by. They have played in something like 1/3 of the New Orleans Bowls. And so that's our matchup right there. Jacksonville State taking on Louisiana.
Yeah, my friend Ralph Michaels at wagertalk.com does a lot of stat work, a lot of charts, database work. And if you blindly play on 6-win teams that are playing an opponent that's won 7 or more, you've made money over the bowls for the last decade. And it makes a lot of sense because a 6-6 team is normally just happy to be in any bowl game, whereas a 7 or 8 win team maybe had bigger aspirations. So technically, Louisiana Lafayette qualifies in a good 60% subset of that system here. But I think it's misleading for a couple reasons that you just mentioned, Mark. First of all, Jacksonville State, 8-4, but it's their first bowl game. They're excited to be here. It doesn't matter that they're 8-4. Meanwhile, Louisiana Lafayette, now Louisiana University, 6-6, you say, oh, they're happy to be in any bowl game, but are they? Like you said, they've been in this game basically every year. So I think this is one of the few times you can buck that system and play the team with the better record because they are the better team and the more focused team here. I think Jacksonville State will be excited. By the way, both teams run the ball well. Neither team throws that great, and I think the under could be worth a look for that reason, under the 58. Normally, these early bowl games have a tendency to be higher scoring because of lack of focus. But I think a run-based attack by both teams could keep this one a little bit lower scoring than expected.
Next up on the docket, Steve, we've got an interesting one right here in regards to name affiliation with a sponsor, the Avocados from Mexico, Cure Bowl. It's Miami of Ohio, really hot down the stretch, good defense, won the MAC championship in a slight upset over Toledo, an 11-1 football team, taking on Appalachian State, proud program, used to going to postseason play, and the only team this season, of course, Steve, that defeated James Madison.
Yeah, and this is interesting once again with the transfer portal stuff. Miami of Ohio's only got a couple guys out, a backup cornerback, but their starting quarterback, Smith, is not going to play. Gabbert out for the year, which means Henry Hessen, who's attempted 5 collegiate passes, will probably be the starter. So this is what makes handicapping the bowl game so tricky. We don't know. Maybe he ends up having a great game. Hessen might play great, but we just don't know. We have no data on it. Appalachian State's going to be without an edge rusher. Their running back, who was the team's leading rusher, Nate Knowles, entered the transfer portal, and then also 2 wide receivers that combined had over 600 snaps. So Appalachian State and Miami of Ohio both going to be a little bit weaker on offense than normal. And we saw this total open as high as 48.5, now down to 43, even 42.5. So you can see how that's affected this game.
Steve Merrill joining us from Wager Talk, breaking down opening day of bowl season, 7 games on Saturday, December 16th, including this one, Steve, as we go out to New Mexico with New Mexico State. Fine season, made it to the Conference USA Championship game, lost to Liberty there, but that was following a 21-point win against Auburn, taking on a Fresno State team used to postseason play, had a bit of a down season. Fresno State taking on New Mexico State.
Right, New Mexico State obviously in their home state. So the question is, are they excited to be here? And I think they probably are. This is a New Mexico State team that's had a nice season at 10-4. And normally you'd say, well, a 10-4 team would like better than the opening day bowl action. But the fact that this program has struggled in recent years, I think it'll be an excited situation. Meanwhile, Fresno's the team you got to worry about. Fresno State had probably much bigger aspirations when the season began than to play in a December 16th bowl game. And although their record might look respectable at 8-4, keep in mind they were 8-1 straight up at the beginning of November, and they lost their final 3 games both straight up and against the spread. I believe we played against it with my under the radar selection back in early November when we had San Jose State as a 2-point favorite. They smoked Fresno 42-18, part of that 20-5 run the last couple years on those plays. With that said, though, as I mentioned earlier, if you blindly play these teams that are ice cold, you've made money over the years. And another angle that's very interesting as well that Ralph Michaels at WagerTalk.com pointed out this week on Wager Talk Today when I was guest hosting is that if you play teams that were 33% or worse against the spread, you've made money over the past couple of decades. And once again, that's because nobody wants to back these teams. We theoretically get some line value, and that's the case here. If you look at some raw power ratings for the overall season, Fresno would be about a 4 to 5 point favorite in this game normally. Now it's New Mexico State minus 3.5. So the line has obviously been adjusted, but not sure I want anything to do with Fresno still. This is a team that does not look too excited to be finishing out the season, and head coach Tedford now out. A lot of uncertainty on the Fresno side.
Now we go, Steve, to our first NFL stadium in the bowl mix as we go to SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, and our first recognizable matchup in regards to some name brand recognition, UCLA. Strange end of season. Chip Kelly's was on the hot seat. It was rumored to be. There's still some thought out there that he could get fired after the bowl game. UCLA had a tremendous effort against USC in the big rivalry game, but still had one more game to play and were just completely blown out by Cal. Showed up flat in that matchup at 7-5. Boise State, what a run they went on. Andy Avalos, their head coach, was fired. They take an interim coach all the way to the Mountain West Conference Championship. So UCLA taking on Boise State.
Yeah, and this line has gone from UCLA 2.5 up to 4.5, and I think you bring up some great points about the focus for UCLA. And you look at the transfer portal; it's like 8 or 10 guys already on the list. And the star edge rusher is going to sit out. But the reason this line moved in favor of UCLA is quite simple. It's because Boise State's going to be without their starting quarterback. Taylor Green, I believe, is going to Arkansas. He's sitting out this game. So they're going to have very inexperienced true freshman C.J. Tiller or a walk-on Colt Fullerton. Tiller's taken the majority of the snaps from what I've seen, but I've heard good things about him. Wouldn't be shocked to see them play better than expected. Like you mentioned, UCLA did not look focused down the stretch, and I think this is another example of a team that's probably not excited to be in this bowl game.
And to conclude the action on Saturday, couple Power 5 teams getting together. Our first such matchup at the Independence Bowl in Shreveport. This is a long-standing bowl game for you bowl nicks like myself. This goes back to the 40s or 50s. The Independence Bowl, sponsored by Radiance Technologies. Cal, the aforementioned Golden Bears, who needed a win over UCLA and got it in a big way, 33-7 to conclude their regular season, taking on a Texas Tech team, certainly up and down throughout the season, that finished 6-6.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the transfer portal for Texas Tech. There are 5 different receivers, including 2 starters on the transfer list at wide receiver. So they're going to be pretty thin there. Tyler Schroll, who did not start at the end of the year, is in the transfer portal at quarterback. Head coach McGuire said he expects Brendan Morton to be back and 100% healthy for this bowl game, but obviously a lot of uncertainty on the Texas Tech side, especially offensively. As far as the line move in this game, we saw It opened -3, and Texas Tech is pretty much a 3-point favorite still across the board as I check the Wager Talk Live odds screen. We have seen the total drop a bit from 58.5 down to 57, 57.5 range. And I think some of that's due to the uncertainty with the Texas Tech offense and what they might have there. Cal's an interesting team. I didn't expect them to do much this year, but that opener at North Texas, they put up, over 60 points. Of course, North Texas turned out to be a really bad defensive team overall, but down the stretch, Cal won their last 3 games straight up, covered all 3, including the upset of UCLA 33-7. Meanwhile, like you said, Texas Tech blown out by Texas 57-7. You just have to wonder if maybe these are 2 teams heading in opposite directions. I know the contrarian call sometimes works in bowl games, but I'm not sure it's going to work in this situation. And just looking at that transfer list for Texas Tech, especially on offense, makes me think they're not really focused for this one.
Steve, this is one of these bowl games coming up Monday, December 18th, that unless you are a bowl expert of sorts that follow the connecting dots, there would be no way to know that this is actually the Bahamas Bowl.
Correct.
That is transitioned to the famous Toastery Bowl because they're playing in Charlotte, North Carolina for the Bahamas Bowl. There are some stadium issues there with the Bahamas Bowl, so they had to move this one to Charlotte. And we've got Western Kentucky, prolific offense, of course, especially passing, taking on Old Dominion.
Yeah, I actually did a solo video for this game, which will be up later this weekend on Wager Talk TV, and I brought up that exact point. This is supposed to be the Bahamas Bowl, but the stadium wasn't ready, so they had to move it to Charlotte. I had never heard of Famous Toastery. I've looked it up this week. It's a breakfast-type place like First Watch, Egg Yolk. There's another. We have a couple of them in town, but it's a North Carolina-based one. There's actually 3 in Virginia, not near me, though, but I've heard they're pretty tasty. And this will be a 2:30 Eastern kickoff to not conflict with the NFL game, of course, on Monday night, as they do every Monday bowl season. Western Kentucky, 3 starting offensive linemen will be out of this game. That's something that catches your eye. And now, once again, I don't know how good the backups are. I don't dig as deep into college football as you do, Mark. You can tell me about the backup offensive lineman for Western Kentucky, but you got to figure that's a blow, right? And one of them is a 2-time first-team Conference USA player, the left guard, Leslie. So I think that's a blow for Western Kentucky, and I do think Old Dominion will be excited for this game. This is an Old Dominion team that really turned it on late in the season to become bowl eligible, and they're just 6-6 overall, and that's after winning their final 2 games. They upset Georgia Southern and then barely beat Georgia State. This was a 4-6 team just a couple weeks ago after getting blown out by Liberty that won their final 2 games. I think Charlotte is good for the ODU alum in Norfolk. It's only 3-4 hours away. They'll travel pretty well to this game. And it's hard to imagine Western Kentucky's excited. Western Kentucky's had some really good teams over the years. Just not sure they're going to be excited about this one. And the fact that 3 starting offensive linemen are sitting out kind of tells you what you need to know.
Steve Merrill, you can join his work on Wager Talk TV. That's right here on YouTube. Also, wagertalk.com. Maybe he will have 1 or 2 under the radar selections for us in the next few weeks during bowl season. You get those on Patreon as a subscriber and as a YouTube subscriber on the main channel right here at the Voice of College Football. Steve, we always appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.